Moving to our next panel, which I'm going to moderate with extreme esteemed speakers from across the US, from both the coast as well as the Midwest. And this topic is on how healthcare startup and venture ecosystem is going to be frontier of the healthcare industry in the future. As we know that majority of the innovations come as a form of startup, and the same we are looking that AI startups will also be a very breakthrough things into bringing into the health system, solving some of their challenges which they have. In this panel, we are looking to understand and discuss about startups, what they are looking into and what's their challenges, and also looking from VC's perspective, venture capitalist perspective, that's what are the upcoming things they're looking into and how they see that in the next 3 to 5 years, the change in this space. With that, I'd like to introduce you to our esteemed speakers and panelists, starting with Dr. Sanjay Dodamani. He's a founder and CEO of the Guide Health, and they have been working with more than 500,000 patients in 4 states in virtual and value-based care. And he is a certified cardiologist with more than 20 years of experience working in the academia, industry, and policy making. I'd like you to welcome him on the stage.
Very good morning to you all. It's a tough act to follow the last speakers, so I'm really, I think, humbled to be on this great panel. I'm sure we have a lot to discuss, and really fortunate that we have the time, and thank you for your time. Before we go any further, let's give a round to both Ikram here as a co-organizer along with Gopal Khanna. I'm just shocked at the incredible roster of both speakers, participants, and folks engaging on some of the biggest challenges one can imagine in a mecca of innovation in healthcare that is in Minneapolis. So it's drawn everyone together, and it's really great to have an audience like you. So give your guys a round of applause for Gopal and Ikram. They've worked tirelessly. I got a call, I think, sometime late November about the plans that were evolving, and immediately wanted to be here and support this. So I run a healthcare startup. We're actually celebrating our 2nd anniversary this month, but it's been, prior to all of this, as a practicing physician for what was effectively 2 decades in both specialty of cardiology and heart failure, but then looking at a broader macro lens of the delivery system and working in large, integrated health systems, and then moving into the federal government to work on policy and alternate payment models. Give me, I think, a lot of respect for all of the various stakeholders. Investment stakeholder and venture stakeholders are also key. So I love the fact that this is about startups and investment into healthcare innovation. I think it's a much needed thing. So I'm sure we'll have more to talk about as we progress.
Thanks, Sanjay. I'd like to introduce you to Pam York. She's the founding managing director of the venture capital firm, which is mainly focused on health tech and deep tech in the healthcare. And she have been into coming from academia, working with tech commercialization at Illinois, and she had also been a couple of startups, and that had led to IPOs. So she have vast experience across not only with early stage startup, but also going till IPO and further. Like to welcome Pam.
Thank you, Ikram, very much. I'm very, very excited to be here. Just very briefly, as you said, I kind of worked across the entire spectrum, started out with a PhD in electrical engineering, did research, product development, business development, launched 2 companies from scratch to exit, and then ultimately, have been working my entire career in technology commercialization across many financial cycles, across many technology sectors, with a concentration in human health and healthcare. And so really, it's obviously an incredibly exciting time. Really excited to share with you the things that we're seeing in the marketplace in our portfolio, and really talk about what works, what doesn't work as we think about AI being integrated into healthcare.
Thank you, Pam. I'd like to introduce to Khurram Mir. Khurram is managing director of the University of California, Irvine Venture Center and Venture Fund, plus also he is also director of the UCI Innovation. So he comes with so many breadth of understanding of the investment side and also implementation of some of those inside the health system. And he have been one of the ambient listening, which Bill and Gopal was talking about. He did implementation, and we look forward to understanding his health system perspective in that. Warm welcome, Khurram, on the Health AI Summit.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me here. Really nice to be here. It's my second time in Minneapolis. Last time I showed up in May, it was still snowing out here. I was kind of surprised. So I'm with University of California, Irvine. Most of you guys who know about University of California, we're 10 academic campuses, 5 medical centers. So I work for one of the medical centers, and we're basically a corporate venture arm. We started about 3 years ago. We're on the cusp of wrapping up our 12th investment. So we're a $50 million venture arm. We invest in early stage startups in the health tech, med tech, and we also made one life science investment as well. And we partner with our other University of California affiliates as well on investments as well. So we provide the engine of diligence, understanding the teams, the formations around it. So when Dr. Pandita, one of my colleagues here, reached out like, hey, there's a conference happening. I was really interested in really finding out about the ecosystem, and the more I learned, the more I'm impressed about the depth and the breadth of services that you guys are building here. So glad to be here. Looking forward to sharing more.
Thank you, Khurram. And I'd like to introduce to the John Perez, who is Managing Director of Rex Health Ventures, another VC firm, strategic investment firm out of the University of North Carolina. And he have been to many other venture firms before, like Ballard and Avia, leading many VC firms in the back. So he have both strategic as well as the independent private VC firm understanding in that. Warm welcome to you, John, here.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and super grateful to be here. And we'll echo the sentiments of the panel. I think we've built together and brought together an awesome group here. So John Perez, as Ikram mentioned, so we're the corporate venture fund for UNC Healthcare. And so Khurram and I both represent hospital systems, similar to Bill in the prior panel, but more so on the venture strategic investing side. So while we represent the health system, we do act as a similar to a traditional venture capital firm. So we're typically targeting, an initial check size of $2 million. We'll deploy 4 to 6 over the life cycle of any investment, and are looking at companies in the Series A to B range. I think most folks either on the panel in the room know those letters don't mean much anymore. And so what I'd say is we probably don't want to be the first logo on the slide. We also probably don't want to be the 10th or the 20th logo on the slide. So somewhere in that sweet spot of growth and commercialization engine. I've spent my entire career either working with or for the 4 walls of a health system, and inside and out of the 4 walls of a health system. So most of my perspective will be from what is that health system strategy and how can we leverage some of this great technology to embed it into the application layer of the workflow and what we're actually doing on a day-to-day basis. So great to be here and looking forward to digging in.
Thank you so much, John. The way the whole session, this panel will be divided, initially will be more thinking and understanding about the market dynamics in the investment landscape in healthcare AI space. Then we'll be moving and understanding more about workflow integration, which is very critical as compared to any other startup. So we'll understand with the panel that's how is critical and how they have navigated that. And the third piece will be touching more about technology and scaling of some of those ventures which they have invested or which they are working on. And then last piece more about the future, what they see into that. So coming back to my first piece of it to understanding how the landscape is, because we all hearing so much in this space and so many startups are coming into that. But let's look into understanding where we are in the health AI space, and especially venture investment part. Coming back to John, he leads one of the largest health system strategic investment arm as a Rex Health Ventures. So John, I'd like to understand what are the key top priorities you are looking into. You are based out of East Coast. We are in Midwest, so we have some strategic advantage, but in terms of healthcare, but looking to understand from your perspective, being on East Coast, what are the things you're looking at, and what are the top priorities in terms of your health system perspective in the health AI space?
Yeah, it's a super good question, and I think Bill teed up a lot of the commentary because again, at the end of the day, we're a health system, and to set the stage, if you think about hospital systems and trying to implement innovation, budgets are super tight within healthcare ecosystem. I mean, I don't think there's over the past 10 to 20 years, most health systems have been teetering between red and black over the course of the industry. And so you have a very challenging budget dynamic. You also have this advancement of technology that's happening at such a rapid clip. I mean, we're looking at replacing legacy vendors that are 2, 3 years old, not 10, 20 years old from a legacy perspective, which blows my mind. And so for some additional context, I would say most health systems across the country are doing something to look at their AI strategy and AI roadmap, right? Every single health system across the country. And I'm super grateful to participate in a group we call our UNC AI Center of Excellence. And so it's what you'd expect. I get to work with a group of 10 to 12 rock stars across our ecosystem, our CIO, our Chief Data Analytics Officer, clinical voices, operational voices, to understand the who, what, where, when, how, why of AI embedded into the UNC strategy. And so what I'll share there is one, as we look at any particular vendor or AI partner that is coming into the four walls of a system, it's going to make its way to that group. And that's the group that's evaluating, is this relevant to our strategy more broadly? How do we connect the dots? So that's kind of the reactive approach, which I think most health systems are required to deal with because we're just having so many new innovations coming through. The proactive approach is we're actually sitting down and doing this prioritization matrix of what are the areas in which, the key functional areas in which we're going to proactively lean into AI adoption across the organization. So we just sat through kind of a prioritization matrix of the top 20 functional areas, probably 100 specific AI use cases underneath those functional areas, and we're ranking those priorities based off of what's the impact of those applications, whether it's financial impact or also non-financial impact, patient outcomes, right, clinical perspectives. Then looking at, what's the technical feasibility of some of these technologies? Is it even ready to implement? Do we have other hospital system proof points that we can see in the market that demonstrate, yes, we're ready to act here, or that the landscape is ready to act? And then tertiary, are we actually ready to act? Do we have champions within the organization that are willing to lean in and support? And so I say all that as a backdrop. My thinking will probably evolve over the next 3 to 6 months, given that prioritization exercise. But where I see kind of the puck heading as far as the most valuable things to integrate into the health system, first and foremost, it's operational efficiency. Anything underneath the operational efficiency bucket is super interesting to us right now. That could be back-end office administrative functions. That could be inpatient throughput. How do we take the resources that we have, both personnel, both things like OR rooms, and maximize their efficiency? There's a lot of technology in its current state that can help with that. So that's kind of one big bucket. Bill talked a lot about this as far as clinical insights and guidance. What my chief data officer is always saying, we're super information rich, but we're knowledge poor. If you look at the average medical record of a patient, it's about half of Hamlet as far as words go. And yet we don't do a lot with that information. So we talked about ambient scribing, like how do we get AI tooling in the hands of our clinicians to help allow them to do what they were built to do and do more with less. And then the last bucket I'd call underneath there is, what are the core functional areas? You talk about that prioritization matrix I just spent a little bit talking through. What are the core functional areas that have a high impact in the health system but have one key leader? Because we as hospital systems like to do death by committee, if you've experienced kind of decision making. And so things like revenue cycle, supply chain, pharmacy, where there's one key leader that has budget and authority to act, what are some of the AI applications underneath that realm that can really drive some value for us? So I'll stop ranting. Karam knows I have also a family man, have a 4-month-old at home, so if I get too long-winded, just stiff arm me.
Yeah. So now coming back to the Khurram, who comes from West Coast, what do you think about your priorities as a health system there?
Yeah, no, I think resonate with Well, Bill had a really good conversation this morning, and I think he kind of called out some of the industry pressures that we're all facing: margin contraction, workforce constraints. I mean, we have clinician burnout, and how can we do more with less? And back to John's point as well, like how really those are the big picture priorities that we're also thinking about. And if I think about that, those also resonate into our investment themes as well, right? Where do we use intelligence when it comes to ambient, both computer vision, ambient scribe? Ambient scribe is going to be table stakes. If you don't have one, like Bill mentioned, providers are going to go elsewhere because we are asking for our providers to do a lot more with less, and I think we need to start thinking differently. And that great rethink is going to happen as we do that. And ambient scribe is just a foothold into that new space of how do we really leverage AI, scaling across that. But we have to start thinking about not just AI, just another tool. How do we start thinking about what is the workflow change we need to bring in? How do we do things differently? And that's the key element around really workforce transformation, around deploying that alongside with AI, working with our informatics team, working with our clinicians, working with our frontline staff to really address those things. And I think that's how we're thinking about it. But from an investment perspective, just want to wear my investment hat real quick, is we also tease those out and think of where are the best that we're going to make. Right now, if you look at $4 trillion market, that's healthcare, the $1 trillion is all administrative stuff that we do. That is a huge opportunity for us to start rethinking about like how do we really save on that? And I think that's where we're starting to make some bets right now.
Yeah, I will circle back on that, especially on operational efficiency, which is on talk these days at the federal level. The government is actively working on, as well as in the hospital system, because they don't have much resources to invest on that. So how you'll do that, I will circle back on that question. And before that, after that, I like to understand from Pam, hearing from both sides of the US, now I want to hear what's your thought sitting in the Midwest?
Yeah, so we're kind of the opposite of these two. We're an independent venture capital group. We're outside the healthcare system. And of course all of our companies are as well. So, and maybe just to back up a little bit, we also invest early stage, from launch. We have actually helped some companies form, all the way to say Series A. So really when companies are still establishing value proposition, product market fit, go-to-market strategies, business model. So we work closely with our companies to help them do that. And we invest in healthcare, human health, and healthcare adjacent. And our challenge is to, because we're outside the healthcare system, our challenge is to understand what sectors have very high pain points, where there's movement and where there's an alignment with adoption within the health system to the extent that the health system is seeking those solutions. So in terms of very high pain point, underserved or unserved sectors is really what we're looking for. And so we're not focusing on operational efficiencies for the most part, with one or two exceptions. We're really focusing more on bringing new solutions into human health, and then over time integrating those opportunities within the healthcare system. So it could be infant health, pediatric health, women's health, men's health, family caregiving, mental health. These are all areas that have been relatively underserved. And so what we see is the emergence of point solutions moving into more holistic solutions over time, because this is primarily what healthcare systems are seeking. But also we still do see the need for point solutions, especially in the family caregiving space, where by family caregiving, I'm not talking about child care, I'm talking about elder care, or an adult caring for another adult that's disabled or very ill or what have you. It's a massive, massive market opportunity for which there have been no real scalable solutions. So that's the kind of thing that we're looking for, is serving this super high pain point, very large market, scalable opportunity. And typically when we're investing in companies that are already engaging with the healthcare system, or where the healthcare system is adopting their solution, these are people who have come out of typically payers. They've come out of the healthcare system. They've been working in a particular sector for a very long time, so they understand the timing and the adoption. And otherwise, we're often healthcare adjacent. So we're investing, everything that we invest in is scientifically backed, it's evidence-based, in many cases clinically validated, or on the path to clinical validation, which is also part of what we help with the regulatory strategies. But it could be a direct-to-consumer product. And so that's one of the things that we're seeing in the marketplace is this convergence of all of these technologies, whether it's artificial intelligence or all kinds of different sensor technologies, optical, electrical, chemical, et cetera. There's this convergence of scientific breakthroughs, which are actually allowing companies to develop evidence-based products that can be sold direct to consumer. And then over time, as those products are validated, and data is collected, they can be adopted by the healthcare system, when it's appropriate for that technology to be adopted. But we do see a growing number of companies that start direct to consumer in order to collect they're often working in spaces where the data is simply not available. And so they're starting, the evolution is collect the data or aggregate the data, develop algorithms, start to build a platform, start to develop insights, and then build the AI architecture over time. And that, many of our companies, we've seen that evolution. It's a natural evolution. With the timing that's now really relevant and pertinent to the integration of AI into healthcare systems, as is appropriate for the technology or the offering.
Thank you, Pam. Going to Sanjay. Sanjay, you are leading Guide Health, and it's recently ranked #1 in the KLAS value-based managed services. So what are you are looking of seeing the trends in AI adoption in the value-based care services, and how these are impacting the investment trend?
It's a great question. I'll come to it. I'm going to go take us on a little journey here. We started on the East Coast, and then we went to the West Coast, and we then came to Middle America. I'm actually going to take us internationally out to Bangalore, India, which is where my grandmother, who passed away 2 years ago, to showcase what good healthcare looks like. Because with aging and all the illnesses that come with it, and a woman who, for the most part, was a very private lady and lived on her own, it ended up being, how are you going to, continue to ensure that, grandma's being well taken care of? Well, the first thing that her, the person who'd come over and help during the day did was create a WhatsApp group. And that WhatsApp group suddenly got populated with her specialists. And that WhatsApp group also led to having the labs folks who would come and draw her blood work. She was diabetic, she had vascular disease, she had difficulty walking in the end, and a lot of other medical problems. But the lab knew that they would send the results and into that WhatsApp group. So they were in the WhatsApp group. And it didn't matter where her providers were. One of them would see a value and raise a comment. And I somehow made my way into that WhatsApp group in the last 5 years as things started to progress. And I was amazed at how quickly there was responsiveness, whether it was titration of a diuretic or, like hold your X medications because your blood sugars are too low or whatever it was. And I can, not objectively say, but, anecdotally tell you that probably the quality of her life in those last 5 years was outstanding. And, and then, she got COVID and within 2 weeks passed away. But I thought to myself, at 96, that wasn't a bad way. And so as we think about all the great advances that we make in one of the most advanced countries that spends, $4.5 trillion on healthcare, and draws such brilliant minds, to collectively think about solving some of these greatest challenges, how are we, innovating in neurosurgery and in some of the most complex fields to advance science, and at the same time ensuring that there's just basic access to care. People are getting their mammograms. colorectal cancer screening, age-appropriate, diagnostics, and that those are some of the most basic things. Every day we add 10,000 beneficiaries into the Medicare system. We're not adding net new physicians into primary care. We're short about 100,000 psychologists, addiction counselors, nurses. And so extending the workforce has been something personally I've been very interested in. It led to an acquisition of a managed services organization that you talked about in terms of ranking, and then extending the team or extending the way in which that care can be delivered using AI agents in an omni-channel fashion, but also advancing data science learning in terms of machine learning has been one of my personal passions, because in the end of the day, we have to be somewhat rational, if not parsimonious, about how we're going to target better, predict better. There's great sexy words like precision medicine, but at the end of the day, who are you going to actually be able to impact, and how are you going to drive and scale that impact? So to me, that looks like not a point solution, but much more of a platform. It looks like an ecosystem, really, and it looks like you're really working and partnering with your customers, who end up actually being not just your customers, but also your strategic partners in how you evolve and develop. And to that end, as I listen to the comments here on the panel, it's less for me the focus on the funding that they hold from a venture perspective, and much more on the strategic guidance of where are the big rocks, what are the problems we're trying to solve, and how do you think we can tackle and approach those with just many more access to use cases and access to sort of, what are some of these most interesting, problems of our day, and how could we break them down to get very curious about problem solving. I was telling the panel last night, we have to migrate a claims management system. I was all in favor of doing that. Pricing was acceptable, and suddenly I saw this ticket for implementation fees, and it was like several $1 million in implementation fees for what would essentially be something that you would just think that you would migrate over time from one sophisticated technology or to another. But it is in our age that we can say, don't update or don't migrate your claims system. Build an AI wrapper around it. Start to use multiple agents to solve and understand the current state, and build in your future state while your teams are continuing to be on the chassis of the current state. That was not possible previously. And the speed to value these innovative opportunities can deliver when they're plugged in that way. So I think being very, very close to where the delivery has been a huge advantage to see what these problems are like, what the challenges are, and how quickly we can solve them. In my view, a big focus, and at the federal level, you're hearing it on prevention, and I think that we're going to have to rethink how to scale up prevention in a big way. So that's one, and the second is, of course, coordinating healthcare and hospital transitions, given all of the focus on health system partnerships.
Thank you, Sanjay. And
Can I follow up on that just really quickly?
yeah.
So I just wanted to add to that. So this past January, the accelerator Y Combinator, people familiar with Y Combinator, they had a demo day with 150 companies, and each company, these were all companies who were developing AI, many at the infrastructure level, also at the application layer. But each company got a minute to pitch. And so a colleague of mine listened. 150 one-minute pitches would be challenging, but a colleague of mine listened to all of those pitches and was collecting data as he was doing that. And typically, as startup launches, B2B SaaS takes a couple of years to build the technology, the platform code, and generate revenue. So generating revenue in under 2 years from scratch is quite difficult, typically, historically. And about 70% of these companies were generating multi-million-dollar revenue streams within 3 to 6 months of launching. And that's all because of the efficiencies that have been made available through AI technology. I just wanted to reinforce that comment.
Oh, That's a great comment.
Great comment, Pam. And coming back to the Sanjay's point, bringing the Bangalore experience, I led multiple health system back in India. And the ways we health leader back in India, at least the way we see that data privacy is issue definitely, but the data, how we can use it to innovate, to help the patient and save the life is more important. Yesterday night, I was talking with Jim Southwick at Greater MSP. That data is there in US, so much data we have, but we are not able to utilize that for the innovation and those innovation which could save life drastically. So the huge stifling around that, and that's what I think we have to think about that, how we can ease it up that innovation should be fostering, but at the same time we have to be thinking about the privacy of the issue, which should not be going there. So the great insight, panelist, and going back to Pam, so you have been working on many health ventures. So what are the you see as a go-to-market advice, and how some of these ventures, especially being coming from a non-clinician and going into the market, what strategies your startups follows to get the buy-in from the clinical system?
Can you hear me? Okay. So one of the things that we're seeing in the marketplace is a lot of companies forming around a particular, pain point. Many dozens of companies. And, the challenge with that is that it creates, and a lot of these companies really do not have product market fit. They don't really have the technology to create a competitive moat. And the challenge that it's creating is that there's a lot of noise in the system for a lot of potentially really significant opportunities. And that is really a challenge for a lot of companies. And so we try to stay away from those spaces as much as possible. But at the same time, what we're starting to see emerge is that it's a sector that is in search of, the healthcare systems are in search of a solution. And the companies that have, and this is not rocket science, but they have the proprietary data set, they have been building the proprietary data set, which allows them to really create a moat around what they're doing with much more advanced analytics, predictive care, predictive analytics, recommendations, recommenders. They're rising to the top. And the advice obviously is, again, this is very obvious and straightforward, but if in other industries, people who have no sector experience can be successful. And that's rarely the case in healthcare, right? So I'm not telling anybody anything they don't know, but it's amazing to me how many founders start companies without really having that sector expertise. And so we will not invest in a company that doesn't have deep sector expertise, along with a strategy for their technology strategy, which obviously has to incorporate artificial intelligence. But because the learning curve is so massive, what we're recommending to our companies, it used to be you could have a solo founder start a company, have one or two people, operate that way for a year or two until they raise enough capital. That's just not possible in healthcare to do that. So oftentimes the recommendation is you don't even form a board of directors until you're at Series A, which is typically where companies are starting to generate many millions of dollars in revenue. And so our strategy, what we recommend to our companies is first and foremost, deep sector expertise. There's got to be multiple founders because there's the market experts, there's the technology experts. Solo founders, it's just really not possible for the most part. And then also surrounding themselves with mentors and advisors, creating that collective intelligence around areas where there's so many unknowns, right? It's not possible for an individual or a couple of founders to figure all of these things out. And so having those advisory board very, very much earlier than what would have been, likely 5 or 10 years ago. And then also forming a board of directors quite early, so that there's this wise, kind of group of people helping the company navigate through these tremendous unknowns and uncertainties.
Thanks, ma'am. Coming to the Khurram, You mentioned you lead both the VC strategy of the UCI as well as also enterprise innovation. So what kind of metrics you look for when you try to evaluate and think about investment for the clinical use AI, and what's are those parameters? Even John mentioned some of it from the UNC, but like to hear from your side as well.
Yeah, no, thanks for asking the question. I think we have a dual mandate. We want to be an investor and a potential strategic customer as well. And when we're looking at any startup, our thesis boils down to one question: what problem are you solving for us? And if I'm going to implement this, whatever solution, it needs to take away from some of the stuff that I was already doing. I'm not going to add one more layer or one more application or one more process on top of what we're already doing. That's what has gotten us to this point. So we're always looking from that lens. So what problem are you solving? And as we do that exercise with them, and it's a 10-step exercise essentially. We're looking at the team, we're looking at the patents, we're looking at we invest in devices, we all invest in healthcare technology. Of course, you hear the word moat. Every company has a different moat, but we want to understand. In the case of our investments, we're investing in Series A. We're writing a $2 to $7 million check. We're really betting on the jockey, right? Can we work with this founder? So that is one other key element. But coming back to what problem are you solving, we're looking at different problems within the organization and opportunities essentially to really rethink the way we are going to do stuff. Ambient technology is one, computer vision is another. How do you extend, like we're starting to think about virtual nursing is another opportunity. We're looking at back office coding, and that's both mid-rev cycle to all the way down to some of the coding that we want to do. So we're starting looking at all the different spectrums of coding in that space, and back office is a huge opportunity for us. As we also think about some of the areas that we want to bring new companies into the fold, we want to create an opportunity. To Pam's point, right? The company's only going to scale so far if you're not. As a CVC, we really want to create that opportunity, a platform where we can pilot these new technologies, really understand, are they fair, are they equitable, is there going to be a potential data breach there? So we have a governance body that looks at all the different various things that around certain companies, but at the core of it is, are we going to be able to pilot with this company, understand early successes, measure the KPI, and then figuring out a point of scaling? Because we have to either scale or we have to sunset. We can't just be in a pilot purgatory, and most health systems suffer from that, right? When do you say no? And really finding that getting to a fast no is better than a slow yes. I think we're trying to get to that as well, really making sure that we can measure, and if we can't measure it, we're not going to be successful down the line. So those are a few things that we're trying to focus on right now.
Yeah, and maybe just one comment to that, because couldn't echo those sentiments as stronger. I mean, at the end of the day, we want to be a strategic partner to the company and dissecting what the problem is. But you mentioned if we're not going to be successful if we can't measure it, right? But what and it ties a little bit, Pam, to your comments on what we're seeing from a go-to-market commercialization strategy. What I see a lot of is most companies and vendors in looking for partnership will identify, hey, here's the value that we're going to give you as an organization. Typically what that looks like is a one slide that says $3 to $5 million of savings, right? But, I mean, Sanjay, your point, healthcare is personal, and we have to get to the personal level. And what we usually do a lot of, in addition to some of those comments of coaching with our companies, is how do you look at not only the macro value proposition to the health system, if this health system is your customer, but the micro proposition. What is the individual patient journey, and what are the value metrics along that individual patient journey? If you can't put that on a slide, and I can't follow the logical reasoning, I'm never going to get to that $3 to $5 million value proposition. And at the end of the day, if I can't make those numbers work, we won't be able to scale within the organization. Regardless, I'm going to cut that $3 to $5 million value proposition in half, just because we've been doing this for long enough to know we want to go with a conservative edge. But if you're able to tell that patient journey from a ROI-centric point of view, you can start to get the right champions on board and aligned, and that helps you work within the system exponentially faster than not. So.
Can I say this is starting to feel less like a panel and more like a workshop on for startups? So for all your startups out there, or for all the folks who are mentoring and investing time to mentor, potential founders out there, I think the guidance to the left, I was just like thinking to myself years ago, where was this group when I was thinking about many of the things? Pam mentioned the board, and it's ironic, I had a board meeting today for my company, but it takes me back to when we were not yet mature and not ready for a board. We actually had strategic advisors. And that list of very generous list of strategic advisors actually were incredible in guiding many, many important components of how we were going to shape and develop. 3 of those strategic advisors out of maybe, I don't know how many, large list, are now on our board because, one, they felt compelled into the value proposition for a variety of reasons, either financially or, or otherwise, brought tremendous value to this. And so I'd say the journey actually starts the day you start your company, to be able to know that you're not alone. You have a lot of people out there who have deep expertise. If you don't, you should pair up and partner early with those who do.
If I may add to Sanjay's comment, I think as a founder, Sanjay, you were wise enough to know that you needed strategic advisors, and being open to learning and being just curious as like, okay, when the advisor is providing us guidance, you take it all in, but you still make your own independent decision. But I want to go back a little bit because Sanjay, your story resonated a lot with me around access to care, right? I mean, this is a fundamental problem we're all trying to solve, right? We don't mostly have workforce. We have an aging population. We have a silver tsunami that's going on. A lot more patients are getting older by the day. So how do we address that by using AI or other modalities to be able to address that? Bill mentioned, and I think Bill mentioned more about virtual care than he mentioned about AI. And that has been, one of the things that I would want to go back and talk to Bill about is like, how did he have that tremendous success about 78 specialties? Because that's a tremendous amount of access that he's created, and he has to innovate more. And just thinking about from a rural perspective than an urban perspective, but the challenges are the same. We have to build the same virtual care capabilities. We have to build the same ability to like provide the level of access. And regardless of where your startup goes and whatever the journeys are, I think you're trying to solve some of the fundamental problems that healthcare has had, and I think that's going to persist, and it's getting compounded by the day. So anyway, I want to add that.
Thank you, Khurram. Sanjay mentioned that this looked like a workshop. Yes. We intended to catalyze the Minnesota ecosystem that is not only we have the big healthcare players, but we also want to have health AI startup coming out from here. And that's what our vision as a health AI institute is. So definitely we are very on. And in the afternoon session, we'll be talking more about where Minnesota ecosystem exists and how we can revitalize. To wrapping up around this question about where we are, so what I hear from this panel that operational efficiency is one of the area which both startups and the VC firms are looking into. And as I move to now more nitty-gritties, as Pam mentioned that they bet on jockeys. So one of the jockeys here is Sanjay. And he has been fortunate to be raising $14 million within 1 year of starting his startup. And he have impacted 500,000 patients within 1 year of it. So I like to understand, being a clinician and now being a entrepreneur, how you see the workflow integration being a startup. What are the challenges you face while you go to the health system to ask for your AI startup to be integrated there?
Well, that's very loaded, but if I break this down and think about that early phase of, where do you go from an idea creation to value creation, remember that there's already an existing ecosystem. There's already existing workflows, no matter how good they are or bad they are. The fact is, you're not going to move provider workflows and create your own. You're not going to be able to, start something de novo and not find a way to plug it into what's happening now. You'd want to create the disruption, but you can't ignore the current workflows, and that is the first step. So it's an intimacy of really going, whether it's going into a patient's home, whether it's following the trail of data and understanding what that is. In our case, and to my colleagues' comments here about moat and competitive differentiation, if there was a barometer for what makes a good CEO or a bad CEO, if it was on revenue growth, then and raising funds, then I think I'll pass the test. But if it's on competitive differentiation, I think I'm lousy at, because we're in an era where it is so important to wildly collaborate. I'm very anti-black box when it comes to let's try and fail quickly, fail forward, and actually share that information widely so that we can learn from it. So we deal with almost 1 million prior auths. I don't have our folks, engineers working on AI. We collaborated immediately with GenHealth AI, to help us with the prior auth space. Why? Because it could save me immediately having that speed to value to reduce nursing time for medical reviews, for example. Well, what has actually happened now 1 year into that, just one use case amongst many? It's not just reduced my FTE footprint, it's actually sped up what was taking 1.5 days to taking 4 hours to 6 hours on our current SLAs. So that to me is progress. So it's about making progress with all of these, by understanding the problems and then figuring out where to plug in your resourcing and solution. So I don't know if that answers your question directly, but I'd say that collaborating is the motto for me right now in terms of how to move very fast and how to bring value. The value in my case has been to our customers, and our customers have in turn turned around and actually put investment dollars into us. So it's been kind of ping-ponging internally for that.
Thanks, Sanjay. I think I should still make it a panel. I should not go deeper into some of those nitty-gritties, being an entrepreneur. And now I go back to John. You advise so many startups into bringing into health system. So what are the blind spots you see when these startups happens, and especially with getting clinical buy-in in their own system or your own system, or they're going to some other health system where you have a strategic partnership there?
Yeah, it's a really good question. 1, 2, 3. All right, there we are. No, it's a good question, and we've talked all about a couple of different components already in what are some of the gaps that companies are have when they start to go to market and pressure test and try to build within a health system. I mean, if I can just level set to give you all a picture of what a health system cruise ship really looks like. I mean, I loved the Y Combinator comment, right? In thinking about companies that are generating revenue in 3 to 6 months. We have probably 1,500 vendor partners in our ecosystem. So think about that. Now, we have not only companies that are generating significant revenue, solving real problems with great technology in the matter of months, but every single legacy technology that we have also has their own AI roadmap, right? They're all generating their own operational efficiency use cases. They're trying to continue to retain that great customer service and that great customer champion and that value that we've had. So it's a really tough ecosystem to break into. So the ability to get your foot in the door and your foot in the door quick and help scale from then on, to your point on pilot, is super, super important. We've talked about what ROI could look like and being able to paint the financial case. Responsible AI and safety is a deal breaker. If it's not safe, we're not going to do it. But after that deal breaker, if it's not financially viable and scalable, right, that's the crystal clear picture that you have to demonstrate in order to make the case for us as a health system. So, those are some of the comments that I would talk about as far as some of the gaps. The other piece that this is a little bit more nitty gritty and tangible, but I see it every day, is it is an incredible sales cycle to work through to get a vendor relationship with the health system. And gone are the days, never were the days of the 6-month sales cycle in healthcare. But again, you start to think about companies that are generating so much traction, and yet the sales cycle processes are still 9 to 18 months. And it's not because the work isn't needed; it's desperately needed. But it's a large-scale, clunky system. We have to work to do things right. And because of those sales cycles, as a vendor, we see a lot of companies, look through their commercial strategy and commercial plan and overshoot their ability. So it comes back to that industry expertise, Pam, to your point, having been around the block and knowing that this is the process it's going to take for my company, for my product, and how do I try to just eat away at that sales cycle. Things like ROI, things like finding a really great champion within the organization, and that cannot be understated. It's super, super hard work to find the right champion and have them be your kind of inside person throughout the organization. It's really hard. It's not complex, though. It's super simple. Find the human, be able to articulate the value proposition that you have to that person and have them be your champion through the organization. Really hard work, but it's relatively straightforward. So a couple of the things on how health system are looking at vendor relationships, but hopefully that helps paint the picture. Yeah.
The other item I'll add is don't chase big logos. I think oftentimes startups start chasing like the biggest logo. They want the MD Andersons, the University of California is on there. You can work with the smaller systems to really prove out your technology. If you're like a first-time founder or a startup that's looking for really good proof points, you're going to find the same business problems, but at a much smaller scale that you can actually also absorb, scale up your team, and then you go to it. Because now you have some validity around your product to be able to go in there. So definitely echo with John's comment. And one of the things that we try not to look at now is ChatGPT wrappers. Like, we don't want to look at any other company that's doing another thing that ChatGPT could do. We're trying to really find that differentiation between what are you going to be able to do. There's the hard ROI, which is the dollars. What is the savings that we're going to get? And there's the soft ROI, patient outcomes, provider, a clinician experience around throughput. Those are all the things that we're looking at when we're looking at any startup. Either are we going to do business with them as a customer, or we're going to invest with them, because those are the things that we are then going to go to maybe the Johns of the world and say, hey, we're working with this startup. Have you heard about them? And we tend to do that a lot. We make these phone calls in the background because it's a very small, tight-knit community. VCs, healthcare is a small community where we then reach out and pick up a phone and say, do you know about this founder? Do you know about this potential company? And if you are a good founder, the word spreads fast. If you're a bad founder, it spreads faster. We know.
Great, Khurram and John. I think that's so much nuggets of wisdom we are getting here, and we have been swayed away. Just want to check with the MCs that's where we are in terms of timing, even though we are so much delved into that discussion. Okay, so cutting short now, like to open floor for the Q&A, and there is a couple of people, those who will be helping you. Let us know that. What's your questions?
Hey, hello. Hi, I'm Adrian. I'm from I'm AI project manager from Veteran Motor Park. Also, I'm getting my PhD in health informatics. So basically, I think we have the same idea. Is we try to deliver AI for the physician, nurses, frontier worker. Also, for our company, we try to connect AI with our company data. So, but it's a lot of time. There's a RAG approach. We try to. We talk to a lot of different vendors. It's like, oh, for just a small data set, it's like 200 million rows of data. It's going to cost you $1 million per year. So it's difficult time to how to demo the value of AI to the leadership. How do you demo the value to the investor for the decision? So I'm trying to ask, what's the framework or the less obvious KPI that usually will be most effective to value that can quantify or measure the actual return of investment that can then move to the leadership?
Who would like to take it? How about you, Pam?
Well, being outside the healthcare system, I'm not sure I'm the best person to answer this, but a more of a generic answer, which is that this is the problem of all early stage companies. You know, you don't really have the data, the operating history to prove the value of what you're doing. And so what you have to do is lay out your strategy and your path for getting there. And essentially, you're trying to demonstrate that, telling a likely story. When people hear it, they say, yeah, I can imagine that happening. And so at these earliest stages, it's really you convincing other people that you can take the steps that are required to get that validation. And that often requires working with mentors and advisors to really get that done. But that's what you can do. And obviously, you would have some internal KPIs in terms of additional data collection, et cetera. But externally, what is the strategy? And then also just demonstrating that step by step by step, you're telling investors what you're going to do, and then you do it. Because you're building trust and that you actually can deliver. You're building into the unknown. There's so many uncertainties. And so you have to build that trust that you actually can deliver on your plan.
And maybe just to add to that, I would echo those comments. I mean, it's very hard to get to outcome if I'm understanding the question correctly. It's hard to get to outcome metrics because it's costly, it's time expensive. But there are a lot of metrics to look at, and we bifurcate them into process metrics versus outcome metrics, right? We've actually started to change the terminology. I think a lot have from pilot to phase 1, phase 2, because we don't want to go through all the rigmarole of doing a pilot if we don't have a path towards what that scale will look like. So it's a little bit of a verbal kind of commentary change, but also there are going to be process metrics underneath kind of the outcome that you're looking for that is quantifiable and tracking. And if not, that's a kind of good time to think about the strategic board and who's around the table to identify what are you going to be able to track. Because if there are no proof points, it makes it really hard. If there are some directional proof points along that journey arc, then that's a case to be made to say how is that going to look and feel, and once you're starting to think about it being embedded into a system.
Agree with Pam and John. I think one other thing that I would add is you can also start looking at some of the early stage health systems that are open to working with early stage companies where they're helping you build that out. Of course, there's a big system here. It's not ketchup, it's the other one. So you can always look into that. And also looking at accelerators. We're in Southern California. Cedars-Sinai is a great partner of ours. We work with them really closely on the accelerators. There's Techstars, a Y Combinator. But you really want to go with, if you're building a healthcare company, you want to be part of a healthcare accelerator. Really help you understand what are some of the things that you want to build as part of your KPIs, because that's where you're also going to leverage some of your advisors, and they will expose you to a community. We don't necessarily do accelerators, but we participate, we mentor, we're open to that. So anyway, I hope that helps.
Thank you so much. Like to go for one more question, but need to be very brief, only on a question.
I'd like to hear where the healthcare industry is on the kind of the AI technology adoption cycle. I listened to a report on call centers, companies that have call centers, and that they're seeing a signal that they are backing up on their AI projects and rehiring some of their staff into the call centers. Where in the healthcare industry, where do you see where is the industry on the technology adoption for AI?
Well, I'll just very briefly answer from my perspective, because our customers are health systems and their CINs and their patients. Firstly, I'm not seeing or detecting resistance at the beneficiary or a customer or patient level. Just to be clear, as long as there's a human in the loop, as long as there's some channel access to people making clinical decisions, you have that. In terms of regulation, right now there's an RFI from CMS on who constitutes a treatment provider. I may be doing all this work, but if I'm considered an administration individual and not a treatment provider, then I'm not going to necessarily have the regulatory backup for all of this. So I think we got to look at this more broadly as to who the stakeholders are and how to bring everybody along. Ambient listening, you mentioned earlier, has been a great tool to bring people's confidence along in terms of what AI can do, and now we're starting to see broader adoption beyond ambient listening.
Thank you so much for our panelists, for all the
I'll do 2 seconds. Maybe just one in how at least I'm seeing health systems think about the world. It's a bifurcation of risk. So is there clinical risk associated with the AI technology? That's a little bit harder and a different journey. Is there no clinical risk associated with it? There's always a little bit of risk, but non-clinical risk. So things like call center, but the back office functions, we're just seeing more energy and appetite to lean into those because of that bifurcation of risk. Doesn't mean we won't go to a clinical risk type of algorithm or company, but it does mean we'll take a much harder look and a much deeper look on what that risk and what the trade-offs are. So,
thank you so much, panelists, for all the knowledge and insight you shared. The main theme which I find that's echoed across health system with panelists that operational efficiency is what they are looking to focus at this stage, and that's what AI is going to help at this moment. And definitely, as we heard from the bill, that they have 3,000 vacancies open, so they no at the moment any risk for human unemployment, especially in healthcare system. So we have huge need for that. With that, I'd like to thank our panelists and thank you all for attending this. These panelists will be here. We were not able to cover so many other questions, but they will be here. You can join them on coffee and lunch and tomorrow to dwell deeper into what, if you have any specific question. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sanjay. Great to be joining. I know that you have